Let me hear you say something.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Perfect. Just waiting for the cue, and we're ready.
Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today, we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we're back. Mort Klein is with us, president of the National President of the Zionist Organization of America. He was the economist. I learned he served under Ford, Nixon, and Jimmy Carter. He's also very much outspoken what's happening on the Jewish and Israeli scene. So, Mort, welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
I'm prouder of having been a biostatistician working with the greatest chemist who ever lived, Linus Pauling, for over 20 years, working on the nutrition and disease issues.
But I was curious, with passing of Jimmy Carter, I know the Jewish community felt, especially since he left office, that he was terrible when it came to Israel.
He was very bad on Israel, but I have to tell you, Obama and Biden were worse.
Worse than him?
Worse.
You talking about post his presidency or during his presidency?
During Carter's presidency, as bad as he was not as bad as Obama and Biden. For example, Biden gave Iran $36 billion in cash assets, ignored all sanctions, allowing them to make another $100 billion selling oil, which gave them huge amounts of cash. Their reserves went from $4 billion to $100 billion, and they used that money to fund the Islamic Arab terrorist groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Had Biden not enriched Iran, I believe 10/7 could never have happened. He also proposed the Palestinian state relentlessly, despite the fact that Hamas was controlling Gaza. Abbas, who's as bad as Hamas, controlling the Palestinian Authority. So he was promoting terrible agreements. He was fervently opposed to Jews living in Judea and Samaria, even though 1.5 million Jews live in Israel. So Obama, Biden were the worst presidents Israel has ever had to deal with since 1948.
Except it wasn't President Jimmy Carter who allowed Khomeini and the Islamic Republic of Iran to exist. He helped the Shah get out of there. If the Shah was still there, we wouldn't have the problems that we have today. So you can say that Biden gave millions of dollars, allowed them to prosper, but Jimmy Carter opened the door to Islamic fanaticism and radicalism in Iran.
The head of Iran became very ill and was going all over the world to try and find treatment for his cancer. So that's what forced him to step out of power. And Carter didn't do anything to try and stop the mullahs from taking over Iran. So he certainly was a factor in that problem.
No, it certainly was. Now, we see a bad deal between Israel and Hamas. And I was just curious to get your reaction because, in a sense, this is the same deal that Joe Biden floated. And because President Trump was coming in, he wanted a deal done with Hamas. The same deal was done. Is Bibi being held hostage by President Donald Trump?
I wouldn't say use that phrase. I can only tell you that Netanyahu rejected the same deal that Biden offered them a year or so ago, saying we cannot release terrorists, especially Arab terrorists who have been convicted of murdering Jews. I am deeply troubled by releasing any terrorists in such a deal, as I was openly opposing the deal of releasing 1,050 terrorists to retrieve Gilad Shalit. And now we know that 20 to 60% of those terrorists who were released have become terrorists again. In fact, of the terrorists released in 2023, in the first deal with Hamas, 37 of them have already been rearrested for terrorist acts. So yes, I am opposed to ever releasing any terrorists. I assume Netanyahu was not only pressured, but offered maybe something of great value, maybe concerning Iran, maybe concerning the Arabs leaving Gaza, which President Trump has been promoting very strongly. I don't know all the behind-the-scenes issues, but I think that Israel should never, ever make a deal where it requires releasing Islamic Arab terrorists. These people are vile humans. They're not businessmen, and they will go back to murdering Jews, which is what their life is about.
Maybe the solution would be, and I certainly believe it should be the solution, is that Israel should impose a death penalty for those terrorists who kill
I agree.
Jews.
You are so right, Zev. Israel should have a strong death penalty. It has never invoked the death penalty, except when it came to Adolf Eichmann. But any terrorist who's accused of murdering a Jew should unquestionably suffer the consequences of a death penalty. That way, you would not have these people in prison to release in the future. You are
Exactly. And hold their
100% right.
bodies, bury their bodies in pigskin, and use that as a bargaining chip, if God forbid ever, because you know they're going to do it again. Sinwar was released during the first hostage for Gilad Shalit, and the doctor warned the Israeli authority, don't let him out. He's a dangerous fellow, dangerous terrorist, and they let anyway. Look what happened. He's the mastermind. So, but on the other hand, Israel could not find the hostages in 15 months. It's the only way to get them out to make some sort of a deal. There was no other way.
The problem is when you start releasing in this deal to begin with 1,900 Islamic Arab terrorists, ultimately 3,000, you will likely end up killing more Jews through these terrorist actions than the number of Jews you're saving. That's the problem.
And you mentioned, of course, that either the prime minister was either influenced or promised something or threatened, whatever the situation was. But I believe the prize on the table that President Donald Trump has been talking about, and I believe he'd like to see Saudi Arabia become part of the Abrahamic Accords, and Saudi Arabia has always made it clear that it wants a solution as far as a Palestinian state is concerned. So this could just be a prelude to that as well.
Look, I've been to Saudi Arabia. I met with many of the leaders there. I do not believe they really care about a Palestinian state. I think they're worried about maybe their population, the Arab population. Maybe they care about it. But this is a non-starter. But Saudi Arabia has backed off a little bit from this demand, saying we want to see a process that would move toward a Palestinian state.
Steps towards it, right.
State. So they backed off a little bit. I can tell you, in Israel, the Knesset only a few months ago passed a resolution unanimously, with the exception of the Arab legislators in Israel, opposing a Palestinian state. A poll that just came out last week, 71% of the Israelis oppose a Palestinian state. They all know this will be a terrorist state run by Hamas-like people or Abbas-like people. Remember, Abbas is nothing but another terrorist who wrote a PhD thesis saying the Holocaust never really happened. He also pays Arabs $400 million a year, lifetime pensions if they murder a Jew. And the more Jews they murder, the higher their pension. And their pension is a salary of 5 times the average salary of a Palestinian. It is very lucrative to murder Jews, promoted by Mahmoud Abbas. So it is a disgrace that people like Dennis Ross, the head of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, wrote an op-ed in the recent past saying we need a state and Mahmoud Abbas should be the head of it. This is an outrageous mistake. I might also add, I am deeply concerned that, to the best of my knowledge, not a single Jewish organization, except for the Zionist Organization of America, ZOA, has opposed the Palestinian state. Not AJ Committee, not ADL, not AIPAC. In fact, AIPAC on their website still support a Palestinian state. ADL and AJ Committee have publicly supported a Palestinian state, even in the last year. And what's more troubling is AIPAC and others refuse to support the right of Jews to live in Judea and Samaria. They won't support that publicly. And it is high time that we pressure AIPAC, ADL, AJ Committee, the Conference of Presidents, to publicly support the right of Jews to live in Yehuda and Shomron. For God's sakes, we are called Jews because we are from Judea. We are Judeans. Jew is a contraction of the word Judean, and yet no Jewish organization of consequence, except for ZOA, supports the right of Jews to live in Judea and Samaria, and no Jewish organization of consequence opposes publicly a Palestinian Arab state. And this is something your listeners should be writing to the organizations, writing to their congressmen to oppose a Palestinian state. This is a terrible danger to Israel, because what you'll have is a Hamas Gaza state in Judea and Samaria. It'll only endanger Israel. This is no solution. And no Jewish group except us has supported President Trump, who says, I want to remove all the Islamic Arab Gaza people to Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, Morocco, and other places. And he's made it very clear. He's saying they will do it. This is important to me. And I haven't heard a single Jewish organization, again, supporting this move, except for the Zionist Organization of America. They can find out more about it on our website, ZOA.org, ZOA.org, and urge your Jewish organizational leaders to support Trump, to remove the Gaza Arabs from Gaza, and urge your rabbis to support this, because right now, nobody is supporting Trump publicly that I'm aware of on this issue except us.
Our guest is Mort Klein, the National President of the Zionist Organization of America. He's also an economist, also very much outspoken regarding Israel and American and world Jewry. Let me ask you this question. You mentioned about the Palestinian state. Isn't Jordan a Palestinian state? 90% of its inhabitants are considered. Jordan was carved out, was supposed to be historic Palestine. People don't look at it that way. So we're talking about a second Palestinian state, not a first Palestinian state.
The Balfour Declaration of 1917, then the other international agreements gave the Jews a state in what is today Jordan, what is today Gaza, Judea and Samaria. And in 1923, the British temporarily gave what they called Transjordan 80% of original Palestine, which today is a state filled with the majority of Palestinians. And then in 1946, they recognized it as a state against all of the illegal resolutions, against all of against the Bible, against political issues. So you're quite right. That is already a Palestinian Arab state. And Jordan and Egypt have publicly refused to accept the Gaza Arabs to move into Jordan and Egypt, which is remarkable. Think about 1948. This tiny little state of Israel, poor, had nothing, only had 600,000 or 700,000 Jews there, accepted 800,000 Jewish refugees from Arab countries where they were being thrown out without their assets. And Israel accepted all of them and gave them the opportunity to have a real life. So if Israel could do this in 48, why can't the Arab states, Jordan?
Very simply, I don't blame Jordan. They know that if they accept these Palestinians from Gaza, they're going to destabilize the country. They did that in Lebanon. They did it in Syria. Egypt is afraid of that. So that's why they don't want acceptance, because they know they're going to be trouble if they do.
Well, if these Gaza Arabs are so impossible to deal with, are so terrorist prone, are so hostile to Jews and others, why does Jordan and Egypt demand that they have their own sovereign state? If they say we can't allow them in our state, they'll only make trouble. Why do they want such people to have their own state? And the reason is simple. They continue to be hostile to Israel, Egypt and Jordan, even though they have a peace agreement of some sort. They really are still hostile to Israel's very existence, because unfortunately this is an Islamic war against the Jews, not just an Arab war against the Jews, because Islam does not allow a non-Muslim entity in their midst to have sovereignty, which is what Israel is. So,
well, listen, Jordan passed up on taking back Judea and Samaria once they lost it after 67. Egypt does not want Gaza, so because they know that it's nothing but headaches. And the real issue, Mort, is that we're talking about Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian state. The real first issue is going to be is that the world community, and I believe the United States also will probably come on board, is that Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority should be running Gaza. Yeah, because they're the only entity that can control Gaza. That's what the belief is. That's what you hear being bandied about.
Then you're coming back to the same as Hamas controlling Gaza. Because Mahmoud Abbas this week has praised released killers of children, of Jewish children, as heroes and martyrs. This week, he has praised Hamas, He has even bragged that his own people from the Palestinian Authority, Abbas's constituents, participated in 10/7. So we cannot have Abbas controlling anything. He's a monster who spends $400 million a year paying Arabs to murder Jews. He's been offered a state 4 times in the last 20 years, by the way. Ehud Barak and Ehud Olmert have offered Abbas a state 4 times in the last 20 years. He's turned it down every time because he will not sign an agreement that says we accept Israel as a Jewish state. We're not going to allow Palestinian Arabs to come into Israel. And they won't sign that because they will not accept a Jewish state in their midst.
And yet, a number of weeks ago, you saw Palestinian Authority policemen fighting with Hamas in Judea and Samaria, arresting them, engaging in gun battles with them to show the world that they're capable of controlling Gaza, right? Wasn't that the dog and pony show, which Israel allowed them to do so as well?
Now, the Palestinian Authority, one of their arch enemy is Hamas, because Hamas wants to take over Judea and Samaria and rule over Abbas. And so Abbas's interest is to get rid of Hamas so he can be the undisputed leader in Gaza and Judea and Samaria.
So the question is going to be, is who's going to run Gaza? I think you're going to see the world community saying Israel can't be there more than extended time, and the pressure is going to be for some entity.
I think there's a real possibility. Look, Trump has now 2 days in a row said, we do a lot for Egypt and Jordan. I think that they're going to help us out and accept the Gaza Arabs. And he didn't say, I hope so, I think so. He said, they will accept the Gaza Arabs. I don't know why he's so confident, but he is. And I think the fact that there's no homes to go back to in Gaza for these Gaza Islamic Arabs, I think there is some chance that this can happen. Trump is certainly confident. We need Israel. We need Netanyahu and Dermer and Yechiel Leiter to publicly start supporting removing the Gaza Arabs from Gaza, because you have the President of the United States promoting it. And it's high time for AIPAC, ADL, AJ Committee, B'nai B'rith, the Conference of Presidents, to join ZOA in supporting Donald Trump's vision for this issue. And it was very interesting. Only yesterday, Donald Trump talked about how tiny Israel is. He said, my little pen compared to my huge desk is how Israel is the size of Israel compared to the Arab world. So he was promoting how Israel is a tiny state, as if to say they really need more land. And he even talked about Gaza as prime for building. They have good weather. They have an oceanfront area, large oceanfront area. And he says, why should we start spending money to build houses for the Arabs in Gaza when they've done nothing but cause trouble for Israel, when we can really now, there's nothing to go back to anyway, have them taken in by their Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Turkey, who have the same, largely the same language, the same religion, the same culture, and he's promoting it very strongly. So I think there's a real possibility this can happen. And I say that again because Donald Trump said they will do this. He said that. He didn't say, I hope they will. He didn't say
it's easier said than done, Mort. Easier said than done.
Well, I agree with that, but it's high time that we Jews get behind the President of the United States, who's been the greatest friend to Israel we've ever had in the White House, and support this. Because if the Gaza Arabs remain in Gaza, southern Israel will always be in danger of being invaded and attacked and have missiles hit them from Gaza.
Now, overall, you said the president has been excellent, and I agree with you. But the deal that he forced on Israel was not good. It was a terrible deal, right?
I have a great wife. Sometimes she makes a mistake. Nonetheless, she's a great wife.
I just hope it doesn't lead to more pressure. As far as Gaza is concerned, it's easier said than done that you're going to have 1.8 to 2 million, I don't know what the numbers are, of Gazian Palestinians that are going to be incorporated into Jordan. They mentioned the Sinai Desert. They mentioned Egypt. Turkey, I don't think is going to take them.
There's a Turkey, a number of them are already going to Turkey, Jordan, and Egypt, tens of thousands. And by the way, there's an entire city that was built in the Sinai that's empty. Egypt built a city there that they never filled with people. It's a perfect place for the Gaza Arabs to go and populate.
Well, we'll see what happens, but it's certainly going to be a challenge for that as well. Are you overly optimistic, Mort?
No, when it comes to the Arab-Islamic war against the Jews, the way you end up being correct in your analysis is to assume the worst will happen. So I'm not optimistic, but I remain hopeful. And
What about the
frankly,
Abraham Accord? Do you like the Abraham Accord? I think the Abraham Accords were very good for Israel.
well, I was unhappy the Abraham Accord promised a state to the Palestinian Arabs. But other than that, I'm glad that they're trying to have some sort of relationship. But so I think that was a hopeful, important step. In fact, I think President Trump should have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize for that. And because of enmity toward President Trump, they wouldn't give it to him. I hope if he's successful here in removing the Gaza Arabs from Gaza and having more agreements with Saudi Arabia and others, I think that's a real possibility. I think the Nobel Prize Committee will have no choice. They'll be forced to give him a Nobel Peace Prize, and deservedly so. He certainly deserves it a lot more than Yasser Arafat, who got it, and then Shimon Peres, who got it. Trump deserves that Peace Prize a lot more than those two individuals.
Will the ZOA, the Zionist Organization of America, champion and go out in a public campaign that President Donald Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize?
When we honored him, we're the only major Jewish group that honored him at our dinner. And I said, and when I introduced him and gave him our Herzl Award, I said, it was a terrible mistake not to give you the Nobel Peace Prize. We strongly urge the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, even on the basis of what he's done up till now, to take the Nobel Peace Prize, let alone what he might accomplish in the near future.
Mort Klein, before I let you go, college anti-Semitism. I know you've been talking about it at your dinners. And Mort Klein is the national president of the Zionist Organization of America. What's happening? Is it a different environment today because the president has made he'll deport those that are from different countries that attack Israel on campus?
Let me tell you, ZOA in the early 2000s launched a 6-year campaign. It took us 6 years to change Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which did not include Jews, to protect protected minorities from harassment and discrimination on campuses. Jews were not included. We launched a 6-year campaign. We got 40 members of Congress to fight with us, and we changed it. So Jews are now are now included in Title VI. Every Jewish group fought against us. ADL, AJ Committee, and the rest of them refused to help us change this, saying you don't go around suing people. We got it passed without their help, and now most Jewish organizations are using Title VI to sue colleges and even high schools for discriminating and harassing Jews. So ZOA takes full credit for that. But what Donald Trump did was extraordinary. He passed an executive order this past week saying if the people on campuses start praising and promoting Hamas and other terrorist groups, if they are not citizens of America, he's going to deport them. And if they are citizens, he's going to demand that the schools expel them as students. And Donald Trump said if they don't expel these pro-terrorist students from their universities, he's going to work to remove all federal funds from those universities. That is an extraordinary statement. Every Jew should be extremely pleased about that. And I'm sorry to say that ADL and AJ Committee, although they seem to support it generally, expressed deep concern that this is going to harm freedom of speech of these protesters and their rights under the Constitution. Why is AJ Committee and ADL defending the rights of Jew haters on campus when, of course, this is not a freedom of speech issue? It is, you cannot make terroristic threats, and we don't want people in our country who promote terrorism. People should not be allowed to be promoting murder and terrorism as the people on these campuses do. They say, long live the Intifada, global war. There should be a global Intifada. What is an Intifada? It is a terror war to murder and maim Jews. And we have to praise Trump for this and support him in every way and not start talking about constitutional issues which don't even apply, as AJ Committee and ADL did.
You find that more American Jews, not just the Orthodox and those that are strong supporters of Israel, are now more comfortable with President Donald Trump?
More comfortable, not comfortable enough. 2/3 of the American Jews voted against Donald Trump and for Kamala Harris.
But do we have the actual statistics? I think the numbers were much greater of Jewish support for President Donald Trump in this election.
There were 2 polls done. One showed 63% voted for Kamala Harris. The other showed 71%. So certainly a clear majority voted for Kamala Harris, when, of course, Trump was tremendously supportive of Israel and the Jewish people. But I must say that one of the problems is most Jews don't care about Israel that much. That is a painful fact. Polls have been done showing that 92% of Orthodox Jews consider Israel very important to them. 44% of conservative Jews consider Israel very important to them. Only 20% of Reform Jews consider Israel very important to them. So most Jews do not find Israel as one of their important issues. Unfortunately, they consider abortion and climate change, I believe, as much more important to them than Israel. And that is unfortunately an issue. And I think one of the reasons for that is that 75 to 80%, according to studies done by Brandeis University, of American Jews marry non-Jews. 75 to 80% of the non-Orthodox Jews, I should clarify that, marry non-Jews. So when you have a non-Jew as one of the spouses, your commitment to Judaism in Israel is reduced. And intermarriage is a big problem for American Jews and for Israel in this country.
Because Jewish education has to be more available to everybody. It's pretty much Orthodox, for the most part, go to yeshivas, day schools, some conservative. But you need more of that because Jewish education trips to Israel, I think, have an impact. But that's the biggest challenge we have.
Twice a year, we bring 25 to 50 students to Israel each year. And they tell us it transformed their whole attitudes toward Israel and their views of the Arab war against the Jews and against Israel. We need more Jewish kids going to day schools. The problem is the costs are prohibitive. We need more Jewish billionaires to be funding Jewish day schools and yeshivas. So
but Mort, you're in touch with them. Some of them that gave to Columbia and to Harvard. Shouldn't they divert that money to Jewish education?
Believe me, I talk to all of them and make that demand, not demand. I urge them to be funding Jewish education.
What did they tell you?
They're not as interested as I would hope. They're just not as interested as I would hope.
But they see where their money goes in Harvard and all these places with Jews.
Well, a lot of them. One of our supporters, Mark Rowan, who's the head of the Apollo group on Wall Street, had given $50 million to University of Pennsylvania. He said he's not giving any more money. And Robert Kraft said he's going to be stopping giving money to Columbia. So many wealthy Jews who were big donors to universities have stopped giving universities. Hopefully that will continue. That's the only way we can really make a real impact on universities. Money talks better than anything else.
Finally, there is a memorandum of understanding that was signed in the last days of the Biden administration that Jews are considered a minority in the United States, which means that, and when you have any federal government money, Jews have to be considered as part of the group that can take part of it. What do you think about that? That Jews are now a minority after all these years.
How is it that we have 2% of the population are Jews, and yet they think we're a minority? Where did that come from?
They think we have white privilege.
Well, I'm personally against having specially select groups to have special benefits. We are all Americans, and we should all be treated equally.
But as long as there are special priorities, shouldn't we be included?
As long as there are special priorities as minority groups, then the Jews should be included. We are 2% of the population. Blacks are 13% of the population. We're a much tinier minority of America than are blacks.
Absolutely. Anyway, Mort Klein, National President of the Zionist Organization of America, thank you for being here with us.
Zev, thank you for promoting the truth about Judaism, about Israel, about what's right in the world to your important audience for so many, many years. You are tireless, and I respect you.
No, thank you. I expect you. And can we get a conference of these business people who give money to all these universities and sit them in with educators? Maybe that's a way of forcing them to appreciate Jewish education, if I can throw that as an idea. Only you can do it, Mort.
Only I. Well, I've talked to many, many billionaires individually.
Get them all in a room together, serve them glatt kosher food, and make a presentation.
You'll attract a lot more of them if you serve delicious lobster and shrimp.
I'll tell you a quick story as we close out. Greater New York Savings Bank is not in business anymore. They had a branch in Borough Park. So the Irish president says to the Jewish vice president, we're having an event. So the Jewish vice president, we got to have kosher. He goes, only make kosher on one table. The rest of the thing will be treif, non-kosher. The guy was a smart person. He made the whole thing kosher, but only put up a kosher sign on the table. And the non-Jewish president of the bank went around thinking he was eating non-kosher food, enjoying how delicious it was. So it's all a matter of perception.
Okay.
Anyway, Mort, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Zev. Great
Thank
to be
you
with you
for
and your
tuning
audience.
in to
Talkline with